Today, we're going to take a look at some of the most fascinating technologies and inventions of the past that you probably haven't heard of. There are actually quite a few ingenious inventions that were really far advanced for their time. Let's start with the Lycurgus cup. This artifact from ancient Rome has special properties that can change color. If you shine a light through the glass, the opaque green of the cup turns into a bright, semi-transparent red. The Lycurgus cup dates back to the 4th century and was made out of dichroic glass. Tiny nanoparticles of colloidal gold and silver color the glass either red or blue-violet. Church windows of old cathedrals were also made with this nanotechnology in the past, but the Lycurgus cup is the only fully preserved artifact that changes colors. Even if people back then probably didn't understand the process that well, they could still apply it and create impressive objects. The technology that is now rarely used can also be found north of Australia. Marshallese stick charts are grid-like structures made of parts of plants and shells that serve as orientation tools and were used by the islanders in Micronesia. The coconut leaf ribs illustrate the location of individual atolls, which are shown on the map by tethered cowrie shells, and also document the ocean currents and the places where the sea is particularly dangerous. In order to understand a stick chart, you have to be instructed by the person who built it, and this knowledge was only available to a few particularly well-trained navigators. Since the beginning of the 20th century, however, the traditional orientation aids have been increasingly replaced with logs and compasses, as almost nobody wants to undertake the arduous training. Fridges and freezers have become an indispensable part of our lives, but who would have thought that people were already working on such inventions 2,500 years ago? In Persia, they developed the Yakchal, a dome-like cold room with a volume of up to 5,000 cubic meters in which ice was kept. There was a whole range of different models that were either used to store ice from the mountains during the summer or even to produce ice directly on site. Next to the dome, there was usually a shadow-casting wall and a wind catcher, which additionally cooled the room. A special mortar made of sand, clay, ash, and goat hair was used for the construction, which had a particularly heat-repellent effect. Here you could freeze food even in the really hot summer months and make it last longer. Many of these impressive structures are still standing today and can be used again at any time. The beginning of robotics also goes back much further than you might think, because the Greek engineer and mathematician Heron of Alexandria created the forefather of all robots around 2,000 years ago. It was a 3-wheeled carriage intended for theatrical performances. With an ingenious system of ropes and a falling weight that was slowed down by a counterweight, the car was able to drive independently for a while. Wrapping the rope around stakes placed on one of the axes enabled the robot to drive curves. Doing it on both sides simultaneously would make it go backwards. By hammering in the stakes in different places and laying the ropes, the mathematician was able to program the robot and determine exactly how it would move. In addition to the robot, Heron of Alexandria also invented something that could have led the whole world into the Industrial Revolution 1700 years earlier, and that was Heron's ball, the first steam engine in history. It consisted of a ball with 2 curved nozzles and 2 tubes that led into the ball. When the water in which the tubes stood was heated, the water vapor flowed into the ball and out of both ends, causing the ball to turn. What looks like a little gimmick could have fundamentally changed our entire history of the last 2,000 years if more people of the ancient world had seen a practical utility in the invention. Even the world's first building automation system can be traced back to Heron, namely automatic doors in a temple. In this invention, the sacrificial altar fire heated the air in a closed container, causing it to expand and force water into a counterweight until it exceeded the weight of the other side of the scale, causing the scale to swing sideways. Since the scales were connected to the pivot pins of the temple doors by chains, these now opened. After the air cooled down again, the process turned around and the doors closed again, a process that must have seemed like a miracle to the believers of the time. It's really unbelievable what kind of ideas this genius came up with, and it's a shame that most of them have been forgotten for so many years, while they could have led the world into a new age. Less revolutionary but just as impressive was the Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni, which was built around 3,800 years before the inventions of Heron. This underground temple complex on Malta is the only completely preserved cult site from the Neolithic age and was used as a sanctuary and for the burial of the dead, which is why the skeletons of 7,000 people were found here. The acoustics in the oracle chamber are particularly exceptional. In this room, which was carved out of solid limestone, every word is amplified 100 times, and thus can be heard throughout